All right, what's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Cycle 365. This is the continuation of our mini-series about youth sports. I am your host, Simon Villanos, and I have a special guest here with me. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Kenny Long from Typha Radio and the hit TV show Friday Night Tykes.
Sir, he is the voice of Typha, and for those of you who don't know, Typha is the Texas Youth Football Association. It is widely considered to be the most competitive youth sports league in the nation. And you know what? I'm going to have to include this in here because I'm biased. I'm a Texan. You know, as of right now, I do live in Colorado Springs, Colorado, but I grew up in Texas, Plano, Texas, to be exact. So, you know, watching Friday Night Tykes for me, honestly, was like just reliving my entire like sports childhood. And it was crazy. So, Friday Night Tykes, it's a hit show. It was, I guess, originally filmed by the Esquire Network and viewed on there. Am I correct, Kenny?
That's correct. The Esquire Network did have a online channel that was able to be received on cable television. And then shortly after, they shut that down and we moved over to USA Network.
That's correct. And so Friday Night Tykes itself, it is on Netflix as of right now. And, you know, sadly, it was discontinued, but it was honestly one of the most eye-opening shows and controversial shows that was going on at the time, you know? And, you know, so we have Kenny Long here. He's somebody, if you've watched the show, he's announced pretty much all the big-time games that went down, you know, all the big storylines, and he was always there. And, you know, he was interviewed in season 4. He had his own little segment there before the infamous Judson Junior Rockets versus Floresville Wildcats game. So, you know, there's a little bit there, but you know what, Kenny, how about you tell us about how long you've been in Typha and, you know, some of the roles you played in this organization / league?
Well, I got involved with Typha, the Texas Youth Football Association, back in 1999. That's when my kids were playing youth football at the time. If you watch the backstory, you saw that episode at my house on season 4. My wife and I, we raised 10 kids. We had 6 boys, and 4 of them did, in fact, play football, enjoyed playing football, and they played for the Live Oak Jaguars, which is one of the original organizations in Typha. From there, once they kind of aged out, I still was involved with the Jaguars, and they asked me to do their stadium announcing at the football field in Live Oak Park, which I did for them, which led to the Typha Radio thing. There was another gentleman, which you saw in season 1, that actually started it. But then after that year, picked up and left it to me, and I took over from there and been involved with Typha ever since then. And along with doing Typha Radio, I'm also a board member and chapter director.
Ooh. Hey, that's awesome to hear, you know. So obviously you've been with Typha for a really long time. Well, I mean, first off, before we move forward, I gotta ask you, how much of Friday Night Tykes have you seen at all? Because I know, you know, some people don't like watching themselves on TV or listening to themselves speak, but I'm sure for you it's a little bit different.
Now, I watched every single episode. My wife and I would, when they would finally bring out the episodes, usually starting in about January, we would sit down every night and watch the episodes to kind of see just how it transpired after production and what have you. And it also helped me because, of course, I get a lot of questions about the show, and kind of helps to see what was produced and put out there for everybody to see, to be able to answer those questions. So I saw every single episode.
All right, hey, that's perfect. That's honestly perfect. I remember those days, you know, waiting on TV for those episodes to come on. It was honestly one of my favorite shows, honestly. So, okay, so since you've seen pretty much every show, and obviously, every episode, and obviously you were there for a lot of the big time games, how accurate would you say the portrayal of each team, coach, player, and situation was, just generally, in your opinion?
Generally, they were fairly accurate. Just like any kind of reality show, particularly the type of show that we had, you'd have some individuals, and I had many conversations with guys after the fact that they've been filmed, before they were filmed, knowing they were going to get filmed, and I would try to warn them. Got to be careful what you say. You never know where those microphones are going to be at. Never know where the cameras are at. And you guys, I'm sure if you watched the show, you saw some of those instances that occur. We call it getting that Hollywood fever. Now all of a sudden they think they're a Hollywood actor.
Hey, yeah, no doubt, no doubt. There are definitely some characters on the show, and I think first season of Friday Night Tykes was definitely the most controversial and the one that really, made a name for Friday Night Tykes because he had a lot of different characters that I feel like compared to the other seasons didn't quite understand how much they would be filmed and whatnot. Like the likes of Charles Javaria, he was probably the most controversial coach ever on the show, maybe even in TV show history. Now, just saying some of the things he did and whatnot. And I know you've got the opportunity to interview him as well.
I have. Charles and I, we still kind of connect every once in a while on Facebook or on Twitter, what have you. And I can tell you, personally, when all that went down with Charles, it was one of those eye-opening things for him himself personally. A lot of these youth coaches don't quite realize they think back to their days, playing high school football, if those that did play, and they remember how they were treated on the football field, how their coaches yelled at them, said the things that they said, things that were said during the games, and they kind of carried it over to the youth level. And I think that was a very eye-opening experience for not just Charles, but for a lot of people. See, you're right. Season 1 was very, very eye-opening. It brought to light, as a board member for the league, a lot of things that we needed to do better. We needed to look at and understand what's going on the practice fields, in the games, because as officials, we can't be at every single football game.
Right. Yeah, no, for sure. I totally get that. I just realized we didn't really get a lot of time to, kind of talk and for you to get to know me. But I am somebody, like I just said, who is from Texas, the Dallas DFW area, specifically Plano, if you know where that is.
Yeah, I currently reside in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I live in Euless.
Oh, okay. Hey, that's perfect. There we go. Awesome. But yeah, so like I said, I am from Texas, but I did move to Colorado right before high school. But I was still able to come back and train with some of the greats in the high school football, specifically Kyler Murray over at Allen, Texas, in addition to Eno Benjamin from Wiley East, who just got drafted by the Arizona Cardinals as well. I do understand some of the things that coaches go through and whatnot, as first off as players, and then how that translates as coaches. And so I would even say it was eye-opening seeing some of this stuff, because in the moment, to me, it was normal to have stuff like, like some of the stuff that I'd see, say, a Charles Javaria do, or even a Maricus Goodlow or a Fred Davis, because that's just how I grew up. I don't know if that's just a Texas thing or what, but it really did take me, watching the series after, I went through playing some football in Colorado, and then I just graduated from the University of Northern Colorado 2 weeks ago. So I have my degree in physical education and coaching as well. And so I have had experience coaching at that level, and it's interesting, it's hard, I guess, separating what you learned as a player to how that translates as a coach. So I get that, but a lot of people who have seen the show honestly don't, or maybe they don't have as much, football experience, honestly don't. But, Texas, hey, it's a tough state for football. It's honestly, in my opinion, the most competitive state for football, and it's crazy,
Well, and you have to be honest with yourself, especially if you're someone that has played the sport, have been around the sport at the upper levels, at the high school level, at the college level. This is how coaches do talk. And, this show really brought to light some of those things that were going on. Now, should some of this comment, some of the language, some of the statements that these adults were making towards these young 6, 7, 8 9-year-olds? Absolutely not. I mean, they just took what they knew, what they're reliving their football days, knowing what it was, because there wasn't a whole lot of youth football when we were kids. It was once you got to middle school, high school, that was your first experience for real football.
Yeah, no, for sure. And there's definitely, I guess, a little bit of a generation gap, you could say there. And so, yeah, no, I totally get it. I totally get it. All right, so moving forward, let's talk about Taifa for a little bit. A lot of, in the show, they did say it is arguably one of the most elite sports leagues in the nation, and I would have to agree. From a coaching standpoint and a player standpoint, some of the things I see the rookies, which are, for our listeners who don't know, they're 8 and 9 years old, and the juniors who are 10 to 11, some of the things that I see them do, I honestly, a lot of my kids I don't want to call out my own athletes, but a lot of the athletes that I have coached, struggle with just concepts and just natural ability. It's crazy. And so with Taifa arguably being one of the most competitive leagues, in the nation, in your opinion, why is it so competitive? Why is it so great?
Well, I mean, probably the biggest thing when it comes to Taifa is, and people have to understand, they see some of the level of play. We have two divisional plays. We got Division II, which is what we consider somewhat consider a little bit of a lower division. This is where organizations, not so much players, but organizations struggle a little bit more. Maybe they don't have the right coaching aspect, things of that nature, and can't compete at our Division I level. Our Division I level is a lot bit faster of a game. The coaching is a little bit better. The players seem to be a little bit better, maybe because of the coaching. And that's going to be the biggest issue. But the big thing about Taifa that a lot of people don't understand is Taifa is not an all-star league. This is not where you come out, you sign up, and you try out to make the team or make a position. This is, if a kid wants to play football, he goes to your local grocery store. He goes to local academy where they've got a table set up. He pays the fee, signs the paperwork, and he becomes a member of that team. Now, whether he gets to play or not is going to depend on what he does in practice, what he does, with the coaching aspect behind him. But you could play for any team and be a member of that team. You don't try out for the team.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, that's totally understandable. Taifa, I mean, hey, like you just said, it's not an all-star league, but I would say there's definitely talent in that league for sure. I mean, wouldn't you agree?
Oh, there's a lot of talent. I mean, even at the Division II level, don't get me wrong. Division II, there have been Division II teams that I've seen throughout the years that probably could have compete and even beat some Division I teams that are competing.
Oh, hey, that's really interesting. So, all right. So, staying on the topic of Taifa, your opinion, because you did have boys, right, who went through the league and whatnot, and as well, you've been around the league for a really long time. But in your opinion, how well does Taifa prepare kids for football on the next level? Specifically, in this case, I would say middle school, high school.
I think Taifa does a very, very good job of that. Example and point for you, an area of Texas called the Rio Grande Valley, which if you're from Dallas, you know where that's at. That's the McAllen, down by the Mexican border. We've got a chapter down there at the RGV that generally they always say at high school level, they always claim to struggle when it comes to high school football because of lack of talent, maybe lack of coaching. There's always all kinds of different reasons. But in the last I would say the last 5-10 years now, during playoff season in high school football in Texas, they used to call it Valley Week. San Antonio in the first or second round of the playoffs would go and play the teams in the RGV and just destroy them. And here in the last 5-10 years, that hasn't been happening. These Valley teams are starting to come back. They're starting to really compete at the high school level. They're making it to further levels of the playoffs. And I wouldn't be surprised to see an RGV high school making it to the state championship sometime soon. We've got one of our players from, several of them, but one most notable is from the Mission Mustangs, the quarterback, Jeremy Duran. As a freshman, he got the starting job for Mission High School and led them to the playoffs for the first time ever. Took them back to the playoffs again last year, made it another level. Now he's a junior starting quarterback, and all expectations is that the Rio Grande Valley will be represented in the state championships.
Wow, see, that's just crazy. And I mean, obviously I'm from Texas, so I still follow, Texas high school football, and I do have connections with some college coaches, and they know that I have some expertise there. And so I've definitely basically witnessed the rise of the Rio Grande Valley these last couple of years. And it's crazy because you're right, Jeremy Duran, he is one of the premier quarterbacks. As far as I know right now, he does not have an offer yet. I know he's been having some looks. But, Jeremy Duran is not the only, good quarterback in that league. Obviously, there are some other good ones just to throw out there, Anthony Sotelo, Eddie Marburger, and that's definitely an area that's been developed. I would say, well, I don't want to say solely by Taifa, but, I feel like, in my opinion, Taifa has a really big, hand in developing that area to be competitive in Texas football.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, these kids that are rising up into the high school ranks now, playing at a competitive level like Taifa offers, and really is basically the only show down there in the valley that competes in a statewide level, not so much just such a local level. I think it really comes to bear. It shows that these high schools are starting to compete at the high school level out of the RGV and starting to make it to the playoff range. It's really exciting to see that. And we see it not just the RGV. You see it out of West Texas. You see it out of El Paso. Houston, Dallas has always been strong. San Antonio has been up there as well. They kind of hit and miss at times. But the RGV has never really been a competitive area that people look at. And now they're starting to actually take a look. There's no more Valley Week anymore for San Antonio. It's we got to go there.
Oh yeah, no doubt. And hey, I love it. As a native Texan, I'm always going to be rooting for, players that come from Texas that have been moving up. And, I did a little bit of research and look into some of the other players, that starred in Taifa that are now, kind of making a name for themselves. Because I know Max Preps a couple weeks ago did release, some film on Mizell Miller, who was a star for the San Antonio Outlaws. And then, for the Outlaws as well, once they made that transition to the Snoop Youth League. And then that kind of just led to, a rabbit hole looking at Jeremy Duran, looking at Tadion Lott, looking at some of these other guys who honestly just starred on the Taifa level, and now they're making a name for themselves. Oh, sorry, Latrell McCutcheon. He's arguably one of the bigger beasts in there. And so, with all that being said, who or what was the most impressive or interesting moment to you or experience that you've had in Taifa involving players or team?
There's so many. I've seen so many of these young men that have grown up and are competing at the high school level now. Some that are reached the college level now. It's really hard to pinpoint any single one. Mizell Miller has been probably one of the bigger faces of Friday Night Tykes and of Taifa while they competed until they left. And he continues to. Him and I have run paths doing tournaments out of state, and he's been a part of. And we joke about it all the time. We see each other. But Mizell, is doing good. I think he's had some humbleism. I think he kind of got the little bit of the Hollywood bug as well when he first started the high school. And then he's been able to come home. And it's helped him. I think it's helped him develop. Another one you could point out would be Lucas Coley. A lot of people forgot about Lucas. Lucas Coley currently is getting Division I offers from a lot of big schools. I think he just got one from Louisville.
Yeah, no, for sure. I've definitely seen that. There's been a lot of buzz about Lucas Coley. He's been racking up those offers, which is really interesting because honestly, I mean, this is just my opinion in retrospective, looking back at Friday Night Tykes as a show. I feel like he wasn't featured as much. Like, he was featured a solid amount because, his dad was a coach and, he was a championship level quarterback. But honestly, he was somebody that wasn't featured as much as a Mizell Miller or as a Tadion Lott, but yeah, no, absolutely. He's been racking up offers. And, I think that's just a testament to, how well Taifa has, I guess, prepared some of these boys, and Friday Night Tykes as a show as well, kind of giving some of these kids a little bit of that taste and then coming back, back to ground level, and humbling them a little bit, because I know Mizell Miller is playing for, ironically, the Converse Judson Rockets. Judson has always been, one of the powerhouses of Texas football. I remember, oh my gosh, I have some bias because I am from Plano, and so some of the old heads in Plano complain about, the last state championship that our squad has ever been to, the Plano squad that is, and they did get to go against Converse Judson, and they got destroyed. And this was back in '93. I wasn't even born yet, but I remember being a kid. And people being like, "Oh man, that Judson, that last game was the downfall of our program." And not that Plano has been terrible. It's just, it hasn't been the same kind of powerhouses. Obviously, Judson has overcome our winning season streak, and I guess they've gotten pretty close with state championships as well, if not overturned or overcome it by this point, pretty sure. So I'm biased towards Judson, but anyways, Judson, they're a great program, and I know Mizell's over there along with Alan Caraccio. I may be getting that wrong. He was on the Outlaws as well.
Yes, Alan Caraccio.
Yes, yeah, and Cracchio plays safety, right? And then Mizell Miller now plays defensive back, cornerback, from what I've seen. And hey, I mean Judson, that's a squad to make. There's nothing to joke about that, but I do feel like both of them are they're prepared, they're ready, and they have plenty of time. They're going to be juniors next year, right? So they'll get there when the time is right.
Well, and another big name out of that squad that you're talking about, L.J. Butler, is at the rival in-district school at Judson. He's at Wagner High School. He's been the leader of that organization there, leading them to a state championship attempt.
Yeah, that's right. So as you can see, there's so much talent that Taifa just happened to have, and these guys, they're definitely players that in the next coming years they'll get a lot of college offers, they'll get a lot of looks. Sure, there will be a couple articles by ESPN or whatever coming out about their development, because it's so crazy to just think that we've basically seen them grow up as football players from the age of 8 or 9 till now.
Yeah, it's amazing to see how these young men have turned out, and it's a lot of fun. Oh, by the way, I'm a little biased as well because I am a Judson Rocket. Go Rocket Pride!
Hey, all the respect to you. I know I'm biased, but I got respect for Texas teams. Always. Always. All right. So did talk a little bit about, some of these players kind of, getting a little bit of that Hollywood fever, but how much pressure, whether it's good or bad, would you say is put on the athletes that are in Taifa, just in general, without the TV show, because I know it's a competitive league.
Well, in general, I don't think there's any pressure on the kids to perform. The biggest thing that Taifa pushes with the coaches, with the adults, with the organizations, is these kids are here to learn the game of football. They're also here to learn how to be a family. They're here to learn how to work for themselves and work as a team. That's the biggest aspect. And I see this day in and day out. As much as you see the adults, and I'm always on the adults about how they act with the kids and what have you. How much pressure you see them putting on them during the game. And sometimes you see the kids get upset because they've lost, because they do have that drive to win. 15 minutes later after the game, after maybe a hard loss, you'll find that same group of kids from both teams over on an opposite field playing a game of touch football while the other game's going on.
Oh man, hey, see, that's awesome. That's what football is all about. I really do believe that. And hey, it does get really competitive. I know, like I said, I played in Texas. I know how it is. It's really hard to admit your losses after all the preparation you do, and it does get crazy because the whole process of just playing Texas football, even on the high school level, well, specifically on the high school level, it's a lot. You got film, you got all these workouts, 2 days, stuff like that, all the off season stuff, which is already kind of giving me some PTSD, not gonna lie, because hey, it's crazy. It is what it is, right? And okay, so like you said, there's not a whole ton of pressure. At least that's what the league wants to do, obviously, because every coaching staff is different. Am I right?
Yeah, every coaching staff is different, and I know I've seen them. There are some coaches out there that do put a lot of pressure on these kids, and it's something that we try to watch out for and try to address when you do see it. But for the most part, I can tell you when I see these kids on a daily basis, when I'm out running around doing games, and I see them out there on the football field, first and foremost, they're out there because they want to compete, and they tell me. Hey, I'm coming for that Taifa Radio Player of the Game award, and they're going out and they're really playing hard to try, possibly have me select them for the win that award. But whether it's a win, whether it's a loss, they may be upset. Like I said, 10, 15 minutes later, a chili dog and a bag of chips and a Gatorade later, they're out there playing touch football with the very players they just got done battling against on the football field.
And that's awesome to hear. That's honestly what youth sports should be. And I totally get it. All right, so moving forward, so with the creation of Friday Night Tykes, obviously, I mean, I guess if you live in the state of Texas, you're bound to hear about Taifa. I heard about Taifa before, I guess, Friday Night Tykes, but it was real vague. I would say, like, I didn't hear a whole bunch of details. You know how big Texas is, right? Stuff that happens in San Antonio, Houston, like that's San Antonio, Houston stuff. In Dallas, we worry about ourselves like other cities do, right? But Friday Night Tykes, um, coming down to Texas and making this whole thing about Taifa. Did you think, in your opinion, was there any noticeable pressure put on teams that may not have been there if nobody was filming this whole season?
When it came to the show and the teams that were being followed, sure, there was pressure on those organizations to compete. It was pressure for them to win. Obviously, the TV show wanted to follow those teams that were winning, that were going to go to the playoffs, that were going to possibly make a championship run. You could see that pressure, and off camera, I saw some of the pressure as well. But at the same time, these teams, these organizations, they didn't have to accept it. They chose to accept it and put themselves in the spotlight like that. So as you saw, there were some teams that just couldn't quite compete, and it showed very quickly during the show.
Yeah, no doubt. And you could see it, like I said, I'm a huge fan. I've rewatched it like a ton, because like I said, it's kind of just flashbacks for me. Like I'm just reliving my childhood again almost. It's crazy. You could definitely see the pressure that is put on teams that may not have been there before. And so in this age where technology is such a huge thing with social media and whatnot, how do you feel about shows being made about youth sports, maybe a return of Friday Night Tykes, or just an increase presence of people posting their kids highlights on social media and kind of just trying to maybe to a degree, some parents might do it, some might not, but pressure their kids to perform so they have something to post about? How do you feel about that whole culture in general?
When the show first started, it was a great thing. It was definitely, obviously, highlighting our league, and we loved that. Highlighting our kids, which is what I definitely loved. I love the fact that they were paying attention to the kids. As the show progressed, you started to see more of the adults getting involved, more of the adults getting more of the camera time, all of the bickering and things like that going on. That's when I started to kind of shy away from it. I wasn't liking it so much. Unfortunately, I think it has created a bit of a culture in youth sports, and particularly youth football, where you see adults, these parents, and I do a show every year right before the season on Typer Radio, and it's my message to the parents / agents. Be a parent to your child. Be there to pick them up when they fail. Be there to celebrate when they win. Support them. Allow them to learn the game and be a part of this team. But if you want to be their agent, then we've got a special place for you. It's a roped off area over the corner of the end zone where you cannot be near any of the coaches or any of the parents that are spectators. And you can mouth off all you want from there. And then we'll let you loose once the game is over.
Oh man. Hey, I mean I love that. I love that you addressed all that, because I really do feel like parents can I think everyone knows this by now, but like parents are definitely a drag on youth sports. And so specifically one episode in Friday Night Tykes I want to highlight. It was actually the same episode where you got your little segment in season 4. And I think you know where I'm going with this, but
Yes, I know.
Oh yeah, it's the Judson Jr. Rockets game versus the Floresville Wildcats. And there was, oh my gosh, there's just so much going on. First off, I mean, this is just my opinion. Mike Dotson, that quarterback, what a guy! Like, man, he really carried that team, and that's, oh man, honestly, that episode, that scene, and that whole thing going on. Honestly, with all there are a ton of negatives there, but his performance was phenomenal, I have to say.
It was. He had a fantastic game. That was a career game for Dotson. I think it also helped him grow up some as well, because you saw during that episode how upset he was getting, and how Coach Brunson really had to, Coach Tommy really had to kind of rein him back in, calm him down, and basically let him know, hey, you got this. Relax. You've got this. You can do this. And it really boosted his confidence. You could see that as the game unfolded. But that game, go ahead, ask me the questions you want for that game.
All right. So I'm just going to set it up for listeners. because some of them haven't seen the game, but basically while it was going down, Judson kind of already they explained it in the episode, so I'll give them credit for that. They kind of said that there's some weird things going on in Floresville. They haven't won there in 3 years, and the refs were always a little weird. So they did ask for a Typhoon Black Shirt, which I want to say is basically like a head official type of guy. Am I right?
No.
Okay. Here, go ahead and explain what a Typhoon Black Shirt is then.
So a Typhoon Black Shirt is a league official. They are not a field official. We have no control of the field when it comes to the football game. That is on the head referee, or what they call the white hat. Now we can advise a referee if they ask. We interpret the rules. We interpret any type of rules in relation to the game to a referee, but we cannot change a call. We can't force the referee to change a call. If they make a call and they come to us and say, hey, I made this call, is that correct? We can interpret that rule at that point. But there's nothing that we can do to change the call. That's on the referee to do.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for clarifying that, because I wasn't quite sure in the thing, because I remember that they did explain that. As the game went on, it was a little iffy. So this is just a follow-up question to that. But can these black shirts, can they advise a referee if they ask for that advice?
Absolutely. If a referee comes to us and says, hey, we're unclear about this rule, particularly at this age group, maybe it's the flag age group. I know that there's one rule with the flag and the Tykes level, the two youngest levels, where you cannot rush the A gap. You cannot line up in what they call the A gap, which is the two sides of the center. We can interpret those rules and advise the referees at that point, and it's up to them from that point to make those calls if that rule is violated. Just to kind of give you another quick example of what a Typhoon official does. It's like the game between the Green Bay Packers and the Seattle Seahawks. That pass that was caught in the end zone, where you had two referees come run up. One said incomplete. The other one said it was a touchdown. Roger Goodell did not call down to the field to the head referee and say, hey, you got that call wrong. You need to change it. We cannot do that either. That is the level that we're at. We do not interfere in the course of a game unless it is a safety issue or a violation of any kind of rules, but we can't change a call. We just let the referees know.
Right. And that's totally fair. I think that makes sense, because you gotta put your faith in the ref staff, because that's why they're there, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
And thank you for clarifying that, because I wasn't completely sure. But anyways, so the black shirt that they did send was I'm not sure if he is still the commissioner right now, but at the time it was Chris Davis, right?
Yes.
And I'm just going to put this out there. If you watched some of their interactions before and how they talked about each other throughout not just this season, but the whole show, you could definitely see that Chris Davis kind of had some disdain towards Keith Dyson, who was I want to say he was the president of the Judson Junior Rockets at the time. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yes. So there's definitely a lot of tension there. And so, I'm not going to lie. It definitely looked like Keith Dyson was a little disappointed when it was Chris Davis coming down there to, be the black shirt for that game. Am I wrong there? Am I reading it wrong, or?
Oh, no. In all fairness, any game that Chris Davis shows up, most people go like, oh, God.
Okay. All right. Okay. Fair enough. All right. So let's jump into this actual game. So going in, this was a playoff game, so it was already a big deal, right? It was already a big deal, especially for Judson, because this is a team that they've always wanted to beat. And going into the fourth quarter, at some point, Judson was leading 37-27. After that, the Floresville Wildcats, they scored and made it 37-34. And in the last minutes of the game, specifically remember, not specifically. I made notes on this. So what happened is that Hudson Junior Rockets were basically at the goal line, right? They were about to score, and they had a chance to score with about 40-ish seconds left in the game. And you know what happened? I mean, I didn't see it because the camera angles of the game was a little weird. It's just one of those things. It's a reality TV show, you know, it happens. This isn't, you know, NFL like coverage, right? But what happens is that there was a hold. Once that happens, and they get pushed back, and they don't end up scoring, and so Floresville basically has the ball on, I want to say, around the 5 or 6 yard line, and they had to go almost 90 something yards with under 30 seconds left. I want to say it was around 27 seconds left. And what happened? I had to count it up because I wanted to be sure. There were about 50 yards worth of penalties that happened. It was sideline warnings, it was unsportsmanlike conducts. There was one offsides there, and then more unsportsmanlike conduct that was thrown on the coaching staff. And it was crazy because, I mean, just from an outside point of view, I basically saw as the Rockets coaching staff almost kind of fell apart a little bit and lost some composure there. Because if I'm not wrong, a lot of those unsportsmanlike conduct penalties seem to be have thrown basically at the coaching staff.
No, and to be honest, you know, great job on your synopsis on that, because a lot of people didn't see it that way. One of the excuses, or one of the, I don't want to say excuses, one of the explanations that I give people all the time was go listen to my full radio broadcast of that game before you pass any kind of judgment. Because once you do, you will see and you will hear just how much composure the Judson Junior Rockets coaching staff had lost. They were all over the football field. They were all over that sideline referee. And frankly, he just got fed up with it. And yes, they did have a lot of unsportsmanlike conduct calls called against them, sideline violations called against them. There were 2 offsides, back-to-back offsides penalties called against the Rockets that also contributed to that loss for them. One of the unsportsmanlike conduct calls was basically, and I blame the coaches for this, was because one of the defenders, I think it was the safety for the Rockets, took his helmet off after the last penalty, the offsides was called, and made a comment to the referee that was inappropriate, and he threw the flag for unsportsmanlike conduct. Well, he saw that because he saw that going on the sideline with his coaches. So that really was the demise of the Rockets during that game.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, here, I don't want to hate on the Rockets too much because I'm being honest, there were some, you know, penalties throughout the game that were pretty questionable. Like they threw a penalty on defensive substitution, and that's, I don't know about that one, but hey, it is what it is. They had multiple sideline warnings before, you know, and I mean, Friday Night Tykes, they really did a good job of showing both. I don't know about both sides because I obviously have not been able to watch the whole game and listen to your broadcast. But they did show that, you know, the coaches on the other team were definitely in the white. They definitely probably should have gotten sideline warnings if the refs were going to throw them. I mean, am I wrong there, or?
You're right and you're wrong at the same time. Okay, so let me explain to you why I say that. Yes, there's no doubt you could see it in the episode that the Wildcat coaches were in the white portion as well. But the difference between what they were doing versus the Rockets were doing is, number one, you notice that the coaches were getting out of the way of the sideline referee on that far sideline. They never made contact with him. They never got in his way. Yes, they stepped in there, they coached, then you would see them back off. With the Rockets coaches, they were getting in that sideline referee's way. He got bumped several times trying to get by during a play. Now at this point, it's turned into, okay, now you're just going to stay out of my white or I'm going to flag you. Not to mention the Rocket coaches were constantly in his ear complaining about every little call. You didn't see the Wildcat coaches doing that. They were being very respectful of that referee and staying out of his way, doing their job as coaches. And then you would see someone pull it back. You know, if you look at high school, head coaches are always on the field. But you got that one assistant coach. His job is he's the putback coach. He's the one that's going to grab the head coach, grab his shirt or his belt buckle, and pull him backwards before the play.
Yes, for sure. Thank you for clearing that up because I didn't want to make any assumptions because you know how reality TV shows can be. They can leave stuff out every now and then. But yeah, it did seem like that the Floresville Wildcat coaching staff were definitely being more respectful, you know. And I mean, I didn't see a pullback guide, but I mean, that's just because it's probably just because of the way it was cut up. Okay, that totally makes a whole ton of sense. But yeah, so anyways, what happened? I mean, for those of the listeners that don't know, Mike Dotson, he drove down the field. He scored this pretty insane touchdown. It was basically just like an all-out run, all on him. You know, he ran into the end zone. He scored at the very last second, because there were a couple times the clock ran down.
Well, actually, it was an untimed down on a defensive penalty.
That's right. Yes. So I guess it wasn't the very last second because that already passed. It was on an untimed down on a defensive penalty. But by then he was basically in the red zone. Am I right?
They were at about the 25.
Oh my gosh. Wow. And that makes it even more impressive because I think on the show, it looks way shorter than the 25, but he basically took the ball. He ran it in, you know, I mean, there were a couple Rockets defenders there, so it wasn't like they played terrible defense, I would say. But by that point, you know, tempers were boiling, like you said, and you know, it was kind of getting out of hand by that point. But anyways, he scored, and then utter chaos just unleashed. And you were quoted, you were quoted by the show, like they used this line, and you said another game ruined by adults. So I mean, just from your point of view, your opinions, I kind of just want to ask you, like, what did you think about the ending of all that? You know, I don't want to put you on the spot and say like who was to blame, but you know, like what just happened? Like what was your opinion of that whole situation? Because yeah, I do agree that adults definitely ruined it.
Well, you know, here's the thing, and I stand by what I said. And the line that I used, they used as basically the title of the episode, "Fantastic football game ruined by adults." And I've spoken to the Rocket coaches who were involved, including Keith Dyson. We've had several conversations about it. We disagree on things and we agree on things. And one of the things that I do remember him agreeing with was their reactions, their actions on that football field is really what culminated to what happened at the end. They got their parents all fired up on the sidelines. I mean, even the coaches were going to the sidelines looking at their parents like, we're getting cheated. We're getting cheated. You don't do that. You don't do that. They got the kids all upset when it happened, and what ended up happening was a parent finally charged the field and went after the referee because they were under the understanding, their coaches are sitting there claiming it, we've been cheated, and that's what happened. And it took a game that was just fantastic. Granted, the Rockets lost, and I'll be honest, the poor Rockets, I love those kids. I always talk to those kids all the time. They just at the playoff level, they can be right there, and they just cannot get over the hump. Eventually, they will. I hope they will. I wish nothing but goodwill on any team, any of the kids. But these past seasons, they just haven't been able to get over that hump, and this was just another example of it. Unfortunately, the adults destroyed a beautiful game that was almost a 3-hour game before it all ended. And just destroyed it by acting the way they did.
Yeah, and it was a shame. And you know, hey, respect to both teams. You know, the Rockets, the Wildcats. In my opinion, I felt like the Rockets played a really good game. And I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Like I said, I was biased against Judson because you know of where I'm from, but I really did want to see them, you know, go deeper in the playoffs. I would have liked to see Rockets Steelers match up that year because I feel like the Rockets may have been just playing an off game the first time they met. But you know, unfortunately, this happened, and man, that's honestly, it was crazy to watch. But hey, that's youth sports. I mean, you see that, right?
It's youth sports. It's sports in general. I mean, any given day, a team can beat another one. Whether who's got more talent than not, if you're just having an off day, you can get surprised. Next thing you know, you're going home with an L.
Hey, that's very true. That's very true. All right, so these are just some questions, you know, that I was kind of just wondering, you know. But did the Judson Junior Rockets actually leave Typha? Because I tried looking it up and I couldn't find something that really like give me an answer, but did they actually leave after that season?
No, Judson Junior Rockets are still a part of Typha.
All right, hey, perfect. Hey, I think that's awesome. I just wanted to make sure because I know there was a lot of talk about that, and I assumed that was emotions, but I wasn't quite sure at the time. So yeah.
Now, Keith Dyson did leave the organization. He did hand it over to somebody else, and the Rockets organization decided as an organization, as a board, that they wanted to remain in Typha, that they were moving past some of the past transgressions and comments that were made, and they were happy with the league, and they were sticking by it.
Hey, enough. All right, so we're closing up here, but one of the questions that me, Justin, Addison here all wanted to ask you was, so we kind of wanted you to go in depth about your job as well, because on the show it kind of seemed like you were announcing pretty much every big game. So there's no way that you announce every single game, is there?
Yeah, actually there is. Basically, when it came to the producers, it came to the show. Before the show, when I was doing Typha Radio, if, say, the Live Oak Jaguars said, hey, we want you to come broadcast our games, I would go to their field, whoever they were playing with, I would get their rosters, and I would broadcast all 4 of their games on Typha Radio. The flag level all up to the junior level. We also have a senior level, which are 12 and 13-year-olds, but they're not required to carry that age group. Only certain teams would. So I would do that. Now, once we got the show got started, and they found out about Typha Radio, and they were like, oh, we have to have him. They basically put me under contract to be anywhere that they were at. Now, the show was only focused on a particular team of an organization. So that's the only game they were concerned about me doing. But I put it again on them that if I'm going to be at a particular field to cover what we call the TV game, I'm going to cover all 4 games. I'm not just going to do your game. I'm going to do the others as well. And that's what I did. So I would do 4 games on a Saturday. And there were times that, especially as we got to playoffs, we had it in there to where if they were covering multiple games that were playoff implicated games of the TV teams that were being followed, then I would do that game at one field, pack up and head over to the other field and do that game. And we would actually get those scheduled 1 in the morning and probably 1 in the afternoon, so I could get that in.
And wow, that's that's a lot of work. That's crazy. Wow.
It was crazy. It wasn't like I was going from San Antonio to Houston or to Dallas. It was all mainly in San Antonio and maybe Austin that I would have to go to, but that would be about it.
Okay, fair enough. Nowadays, what does your schedule kind of look like as someone who is the voice of Typha Radio?
Well, I mean, and it's funny, everybody focuses on Typha and Typha Radio and what I do there, but I do a lot more than that. I do have a full-time job. I work here in Dallas at Universal Technical Institute as a senior employment specialist, where I help the students here find jobs in their trade school that they're going to for automotive, diesel, and welding. Then I also I do Typha Radio on Wednesday nights. When the season's going, I do a show on Wednesday nights. And of course, usually Saturday, I am somewhere in the state. Now, this is where it does get rough. Either Houston, Dallas, San Antonio. There's been times I've gone to the RGV. There's been times I've been in West Texas or El Paso covering 4 football games on a Saturday. But the other thing that I do is I also call high school football games. So usually a Thursday or even a Friday night, I'll either be somewhere here in Dallas or in San Antonio doing high school football for Texas Sports Productions, TSP, doing play-by-play. And then occasionally on Saturday night, I also do the television broadcast where I'm the audio engineer for the high school football TV broadcast on KCWX TV.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's honestly awesome. Hey, shout out to all those organizations and whatnot. Those are big parts of football, and that's awesome. All right, hey, thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Not a problem. It was good fun.
What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Cycle 365. This is the second episode in our mini series. So, should have just heard the Kenny Long interview that we did. And that wasn't all there was to it because I personally wanted to keep it a little bit shorter on that side just because I didn't want to overwhelm him too much. But we definitely asked him some questions off the air, or well, Justin and Addison asked him really good questions off the air. And, I kind of just want to talk about that. So, hey, yeah, y'all go ahead and take it away.
All right, so I don't know where necessarily you want me to start, but basically we kind of just talked to him a little bit more about in-depth things about stuff he touched on in the interview, and then just some of the other questions we were wondering, like other players that were involved in Taifa and what they're up to now, as far as things like kind of what he thinks would be good things for football in Texas, how he feels the high school systems in Texas prepare kids for the next level. And overall, he kind of said he thinks Texas does a good job preparing kids for their colleges and whatnot, as well as being involved in a program that helps advance kids, not just in football, but education as well. And I know you were listening on that, Simon. Do you want to touch a bit more on it?
Yeah, I'll touch in on it. Plus, I mean, I'm from Texas. I think I've said that like a million times, but I've definitely experienced a lot of the things that most Texas football players have gone through. And yeah, I mean, I think as a physical educator, which is something that I am, I definitely value sports and whatnot. I think it keeps kids off the streets. It teaches them good life lessons. That is, if the coaches have that same value. And I mean, I think there aren't as many coaches nowadays that are very, hey, we got to win now and nothing else matters. Mindset wise, I think there are more coaches that care about the actual athlete, their families and how well they do after they leave. And football is definitely one of those games where there are a lot of teachable and transferable skills, like we talked about in the first episode. And look, I think with football, obviously in Texas, they want their kids to succeed athletically. That's why, I mean, because everyone's competitive. That's just it, in more normal states, maybe Colorado per se, I would say every 5 or 6 high schools, there might be one D1 player. In Texas, especially, okay, I'll say this, on the Division 5 and Division 6 levels, so the top 2 divisions, there's at least one Division 1 football player on every high school team in Texas, and I truly believe that. If not talent, or if not Division 1 talent, then definitely Division 1 ethic, I should say. And there's just so much talent, and I think in Texas they do a really good job of developing players, because you're not going to get away with just having one good person. You got to have a mob or a squad to shut down these high-powered offenses, because every day there's players that are transferring for to get better, to go to a better situation, whether it's to go to a situation where they're not in a neighborhood that has a ton of gang violence, or go to a situation where they themselves will probably succeed better because there's not as many distractions in school. And so, in my opinion, I think Texas does an excellent job in general, first off, educating the kids and telling them, like, look, football, it's not going to last forever. At the max, this thing will carry you, sport, at least you playing the sport might carry you maybe to your late 30s, if that, but even that's really rare. And I think most kids know that going pro is rare. So they really do focus on, hey, use this thing as a way to get out of your situation and be in a better situation. That's just my honest opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I think Kenny did a good job touching on that sort of stuff off air, and what he thinks of youth football in Texas. And I think in his interview, he did touch a bit more on how the show and the league was actually portrayed. Like, was it accurate and whatnot? And I know off the air, we asked him about, since he sits on the board of Taifa, we asked him about whether or not these accusations, sometimes they get that, the head coach of, let's say, the Mustangs or something, sits on the board as well. And so they're making rules and stuff. to favor their team in the playoffs and whatnot. And, he did address it in a very professional and respectful way, basically saying that, like, yeah, they might be, he's not going to say that sometimes they don't do it, but them trying to influence what they're doing, it rarely works because they can't just say, oh, I want to do this, and so it's going to happen. They have to pass it by other board members and then go higher up in the structural system of Taifa. So, I think that kind of put a big stop to accusations that people had when watching the show about, these coaches are influencing it too much to try and swing it in their favor. And he kind of squashed all rumors about that really well. And that just is another testament to how well Texas is doing right now. Kind of curving politics out of the way of the development of the kids and the athletes.
No, I totally agree. One of the pieces of Taifa is that it's so structured. Like, I know Kenny said, like, oh, well, this isn't really an elite, league. In my opinion, I think it is, because there are plenty of leagues that aren't as structured as Taifa, that don't have, like, black shirts, can advise on a rule outside of the 3 refs that are already there. Like, if I'm being honest, most youth sports leagues for football maybe have 1 or 2 refs at most, and that's it. And if there's a complaint, oh, well, suck it up. It doesn't matter. And I think, Taifa really does a good job of, like, all right, this is the structure, and it's structured like this because we've had problems before. And you know what? It just gets rid of a lot of drama because, having a really good structure, you're basically working off of facts and, plenty of good people, honestly. And so, and not just like one person overseeing the whole thing, but plenty of people that have a ton of eyes on the situation and could input what they want to say.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I definitely agree with that. And it is really nice how they do try to cut out and try to mitigate the problems as much as they can. And like we talked about in the interview with Kenny, is the whole dilemma at that Jetson Junior Rockets game. Or, sorry, not Jetson Junior Rocket game. And how Kenny broke it down, and like you said, is and I've seen it on other ends where it's like in hockey we don't get that, we don't have that at all. So it would have been a call that it's just like the ref is not going back on that, tough stuff, suck it up, buttercup, like that's what you have to live with. And it sucks, but it's nice that they actually have those things in place. So that way you can start to work on a problem. And then, they could take someone who's not involved in the game and they can really just look at a rule and then go from there. And they can advise, and although a call can't necessarily can't be returned or overturned, they can advise on it and look into it and provide further examination.
Oh, sure. And that's what makes Taifa elite, because, first off, to have that level of structure and complexity, you got to have money, because all these people aren't going to do it just for free. And I'm sure they're not getting paid bank. I'm sure they're getting a little bit of money to, do their job right and have some respect for the game. And that's what makes Taifa special. That's what makes it elite. Because, this is just, we will get into the whole discrimination, privilege thing later on in future episodes. But, if you go to a rich league, obviously they'll be able to afford all these great things. We didn't really touch on this a ton because it just didn't come up. But for those of you who haven't seen Friday Night Tykes, if you watch the championship games, they're played in pretty nice stadiums. Stadiums in Texas, they just don't let anybody play in them because they have to maintain it every week pretty much, because that's just the aesthetic. So they got to pay a pretty solid rental fee to rent out those stadiums, those venues, not only for the kids but for the adults, so that all their families could go and be able to see their kids play football. And honestly, with Taifa, there are multiple ways where you could watch a Taifa football game. Whereas if you're playing in a YMCA league, I mean, you're either there or you're not. And if there's not anybody to film it, well, tough luck, buddy. Like, you're not going to be able to see that memory ever again. So it is what it is.
Yeah, and remind me again, Simon, when did you start playing football in Texas?
So I started playing on the middle school level just because my family personally didn't have the kind of money to, afford to put myself in a good league. And then that also meant buying pads, equipment, all that stuff. And I mean, I was going to outgrow all that equipment because that's what happens when you have growing kids. So I started at middle school.
All right, yeah. So did they have anything at the middle school level close to Taifa for you, or just kids your age? And how was that compared to, I guess, other leagues like Taifa?
I would say stadium-wise or venue-wise, that was pretty close to Taifa, if not better. In my city, my hometown in Plano, we had 3 main fields that were, how should I say this? 3 main fields that were basically designated for the central middle schools. And so my city was divided off into East, West, and Central, and they're like 13 middle schools, so you could figure out the math from there. Semi, divided up evenly. And so there are 3 different fields, and then as well there was one huge stadium, Clark Stadium, which is definitely bigger than my own college's stadium, or alma mater stadium, UNC. That seated at least 10,000 people, and and so many people go there. It's been a really big deal. Like the likes of Johnny Manziel has been there, Kyler Murray, like Heisman winners have been there, Division I players, NFL players, whatever you can name it. It's built for those type of people to be comfortable up in the press boxes and whatnot. And so I did have an opportunity as a kid, at least once every year, actually twice every year, because there was another stadium in my city that we were able to play in whenever we played schools from the east side. So that stadium was designated for east side schools, and that one was even bigger. So every year we would get a chance to play in 2 of those big stadiums, and we'd have a pretty solid field to play on, along with goalposts and down markers and all that. From a reffing standpoint, I'm pretty sure we always had maybe not like a black shirt say, but like a head ref. So there would be like 3 refs and then another guy that would kind of just weigh in, and he would, or she, I mean, it could definitely be a she. He or she would make sure that the games go smoothly and that there wasn't anything going wrong. And those guys were all hired by the school district, because I went to a better school district, honestly, or a bigger school district where they could afford to have a really good structure. And so they would live stream games as well. And this was back like early 2010s, I would say, when live streaming wasn't as normal as it is now. We definitely had a solid amount of what Taifa had. I mean, uniform-wise, it varied from school to school. Each school's uniform was as good as the donors that gave money to that middle school, so it really just depended.
Oh, gotcha. Well, that's always really good when you can have that sort of structure, especially like you said, the live streaming and stuff wasn't as common back then as it is now. So, that kind of tells me that they were ahead of the game per se, and they did their best to make it all worthwhile for the athletes. Would you say?
Yeah, no, I would say so, absolutely. This is a personal memory of mine, but my 8th grade year, my dad had to go to Colorado because he wanted to start school up here and in Colorado Springs, and so he did not see any of my 8th grade games at all. But no, at least the Clark Stadium game, which was one of the big games we played in the big stadium, they live streamed that just because they had the technology to from the booth and whatnot. And so he was actually able to see that game only, actually, now that I think about it, just because it was live streamed and whatnot. And I thought it was really cool because he called me afterwards, said I did a good job, we talked a bit, and it was really nice. And like I said, this was back in the 2010s, and I mean, you can't really live stream as much back then, and even then, I mean, there were some games they could live stream, some that they couldn't. It just depended. So that's that was our deal.
Yeah, that's really cool, and that's awesome. You were able to get that connection, all that. Kind of bringing it back to the questions we asked Kenny off air. I'm trying to remember some of the questions I asked. Was there anything else question wise that we asked off air that kind of made an impression on you?
Think yeah, we asked about Justice Hurt.
Yeah, we did. He said he was a freshman, right? And he was doing well. He didn't touch too much on it. He just kind of said he's a freshman, he's doing well, and then he's we'll see what happens, basically. I don't know if there was anything else you got out of it.
I mean, really, all I got out of it is that, not every player that goes to Taifa is going to be super successful. As is Mizell Miller and Alan Caraccio and Lucas Coley and some of the guys that we mentioned, McCutcheon. So they're freaks of nature. They're going to be able to start on their varsity squads right away. You got to remember that this is Texas. This ain't no scrub, state or whatever with no talent. Like I said, you got D1 players on pretty much every squad up there or down there. And so it's not, you got to be realistic with it, Justice, I'm sure, is a solid player and whatnot, but I mean, starting at varsity as a freshman in Texas, that's definitely a special thing. And it just goes to show, I mean, maybe he's not trash, but, maybe it's something else. Like maybe he's not as physically developed as a Mizell Miller or a Latrell McCutcheon or whatnot. And, that's just youth sports. Like those are factors that you really can't handle. I mean, you can't handle hands-on as a coach or as an athlete, that's just sports.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what he kind of brought into that when we were talking about Justice Hurt and a bunch of those other guys is a lot of these kids, as they kind of got older, when they were on Friday Night Tykes, they kind of got what he called what was it, the Hollywood factor, or
yes,
Hollywood sickness, something like that. A lot of these kids kind of got it, and then they got to high school and they realized that, this isn't what it is. I can't just ride off of Taifa anymore. I can't ride off of being on the TV show. All these guys are getting looks and everybody knows everybody. So, I guess I would say they kind of got humbled. Not all of them got it, but the ones that did, they kind of realized, it's not as big of a deal as, maybe I was making it out to be.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I thought that was interesting. It wasn't like that was something that I didn't totally see coming, in this day of social media and whatnot, especially with a show like Friday Night Tykes that was shown nationally, not just in Texas, all over the country. I mean, look, it's hard to deal with some of that pressure and attention because pretty much anybody could hit up any of these players on social media and be like, hey, great job on that one game in Friday Night Tykes. And, when you look at the viewers of the show, I mean, it was in the millions. And so it's really not that hard to believe that some of these kids maybe got at least hundreds of DMs every day, thousands once they got social media and whatnot. And it's crazy, and it's, I think at the end of the day, it's important for them to, go back to football and get humbled and whatnot, because at the end of the day, you're going to be judged as an athlete. As an athlete, you're going to be judged by what you do on the field. And they know that, because they didn't choose to play in Taifa just to have fun. They wanted to play against other guys who wanted to prove themselves against the best. And, that drive isn't something that just goes away like, I proved that I was the best against other, 8, 11-year-olds for this amount of time. So that means I never have to prove it again, even though I'm on the high school level. Like, nah, if you get exposed on the high school level, especially nowadays where everyone has a camera, they're going to let you know. And it's not, being successful in a youth league isn't something to exactly brag about, no matter how much it's advertised.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that could go for a lot of youth sports too, is like some people that were really good when they were younger, they kind of make it to the high school level and all that, and they expect to have the same success. But, when you hit that high school level, you're not just playing against the small little group in your area anymore. You're playing against, people all around, your area. So like these people look at it and they go, oh, I'm going to have a lot of success here, and then like, you know, some kid from they've never heard of but was in a greater area where they were at playing youth, they realized, oh, I gotta, you know, I have to prove myself again. Just being young didn't showcase my talent all the way, because, you know, the one kid who's really good when he's young isn't necessarily going to be the kid that's great when he's older, because people have time to develop. You know, they start going through maturing stages in life, and, you know, then they start hitting the weight room and stuff. And so you got to prove yourself at every level every year. Otherwise, you kind of just fade off and people go, oh, he's not as good as he or she, not as good as they were when they were younger. And I think a lot of people ride on that too much.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And on that note, like, Addison and I could tell you this, like, just from growing up, is there's kids that, you know, I grew up playing with who were getting the looks, getting the offers and everything. And not so long ago, I look back and they haven't accomplished too much. You know, they were great as kids, but now that they're at the adult, like, where they're at the level where it really matters, where, you know, your height doesn't say everything about you, your this doesn't say everything about you, and now they've dropped off the grid and they are not as good as they used to be. And what looked like very promising careers for them has kind of, unfortunately, kind of fizzled out for them. It's just kind of interesting is that, like, you know, a lot of these kids who were like, you know, you were thinking like you'd see them, and 5 or 6 years down the road, you know, kids catch up to them, you know, and now they're part of they're the same as everyone else. So it's kind of interesting to see is that the kids you used to measure yourself up with and who were the stuff at 10, 11, 12 years old, you know, 10 years later, it's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, very true. Also, I just realized we never really got to introduce Justin. The person that was just talking was Justin Zyke. If you want to do a quick introduction for it.
Hello, Justin Zyke. I've grown up playing hockey for 18 years now, so I don't have a lot of experience in football, playing it at least, but you know, playing hockey, so I do understand youth sports, know what that's like to an extent.
Yeah. And by the way, these two were both sitting on the interview, so they got to listen in and whatnot as I interviewed Kenny. But anyways, yeah, hey, that's a really good point, Justin, that you made. And honestly, I feel like this is not the case for every kid, but for a lot of kids, I feel like parents and the pressure they put on their children plays a really big role on maybe how some of these kids see themselves as athletes. Some parents will be like, oh, hey, you know, you're doing great. Don't focus too much on sports. You know, maybe focus a little bit more on how you could financially gain from this thing and whatnot. And then that could get misconstrued sometimes, and, you know, it gets them unfocused, and maybe they're not putting in as much hard work, and before you know it, they fall behind. And, you know, Justin, I'm pretty sure it was Justin, or either one of y'all asked Kenny about, you know, the adult pressure in youth sports, and kind of elaborate on that. I know we talked about it during the actual interview, but basically, Kenny, he did this thing that really struck a chord with me. He said that, you know, he's never seen a child get a multi-million-dollar contract straight out of a youth league. He's never seen a coach in a youth league get a multi-million-dollar contract out of a youth league. So that says a lot, in my opinion.
That was me who asked the question, because I do remember Kenny saying as the seasons went on, it became less about the kids and more about the parents. And like you said, from the Judson game, is you were hearing the parents beaking at the camera, and not the Typha cameras, but the Esquire cameras. Like they were just chatting up the camera, like. And, you know, you could see how it's definitely the parents get more involved. And again, I've seen it growing up, is you can see the parents, they they do vicariously live through their children. And Kenny did say that, is a lot of them do live through their children, is they never got to accomplish that when they were younger, and so they are living out their dreams through their child.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. So here's a question I have for y'all. So we've talked about, social media, pressure from adults, but how much do you think, social media, and not even just social media, but shows, media in general, like Friday Night Tykes, pressure on kids and affects how they see themselves? Because I definitely see plenty of kids and adults especially getting some big heads after seeing their names through social media, through media, just a ton, and them getting DMs and whatnot. I definitely feel like that affects how adults and children on the youth sports level see themselves.
Yeah, and Kenny touched on that a little bit with the Hollywood fever and whatnot. Some kids did get starstruck and by themselves and kind of got big heads over the whole thing. But then another thing he touched on was, a lot of the kids also wouldn't necessarily get that sort of thing. Like, it wasn't as big of a deal. And one thing he talked about was, they'd play a game with each other or against each other. And then, 15 minutes after the game's over, they'd be on a little field next to the actual football field playing an intramural game amongst themselves, like mixing up the teams and everything and just playing together like it was no big deal and, just having fun being kids. And I think part of where this stigma of where it looks like a lot of pressure is put on these kids is because people think, oh, there's cameras, these kids feel pressure, oh, it's on national television. When, at least for Taifa, it looked kind of like these kids thought it was just cool that cameras were filming them, and because they had the streaming around them, they were kind of used to having some cameras filming their games and stuff. So they just kind of found it cool, and then when they saw themselves on TV, they were like, hey, that's cool, but it didn't really change much of their lives. And then, of course, some people it did and all that. And I think just these documentaries, sometimes people think things are going on when it's not. And that's simply just because of what you see out of the whole thing. And you see the cameras around and what they're filming. So it seems like it's a bigger deal than it potentially is. But of course, that's just the way they film things and the way they broadcast it. They have to make it seem a certain way, and they do. And so that's part of the entertainment factor, but it's not necessarily the reality, even though Kenny said the way Esquire portrayed Taifa and the people in Taifa was pretty accurate to what actually happened.
Justin, did you have anything you wanted to add on to that?
No, I think Addison pretty much hit the nail on the head. I do feel like you said, is everyone has a camera nowadays, and so you never know who's going to be at the right place at the right time. And I know this isn't sports, but Mason Ramsey, the yodeling kid, someone had their cell phone out in Walmart, and it blew up, and now the kid's performing at Coachella and everything. It's just a simple trip to Walmart, and that's what transpired from it. So I think it can help. Like, it can make or break someone's career. You're at the right place at the right time. Someone sees the skill level you have, and now all of a sudden, you're getting calls from coaches, and you're getting calls from scouts and everything, wanting you to come play here, wanting you to come play there. So it all kind of varies. But I think overall, Addison probably hit the nail on the head. And, like Kenny said, some kids kind of felt it a little bit, others didn't. It all kind of depended on the kid. And if I'm being honest, it will happen to you a little bit. Like, think about that. It's not something we grow up with. It's not something we're used to. It's not something we're used to at all. We're not used to necessarily waking up and, we're going to get filmed today. So I think it happens a little bit. We are human, and stuff does happen, but it is a crazy, unique experience that we're all very excited that we get to see and be a part of. So I think it happens a little bit, but I don't think it was ever ridiculous. Again, we didn't get to see the show. We didn't get to see everything that happened, but overall, I feel like it wasn't anything too crazy. And most of all, we just got to see these kids, see the parents living their normal lives.
Yeah, and to kind of go back on the filming and stuff, I'm gonna speak a little from experience here. Throughout my career in hockey, I've had the luck of being able to get streamed across certain platforms, some provincial, some nationally, both in Canada and the United States. And when you're playing your sport, the cameras really don't matter. Like, they're there at first, but then after the first couple games, it just kind of is like whatever. You use it more like film, because like nowadays anybody can pull out a camera. It's just where it's getting filmed over. And then especially this year, I played in a smaller town. The town had a hockey team for years, and then they lost it. And then we came in as an expansion team. And so the town was really looking forward to it. And so when you got a good majority of the town coming out to your games every weekend, that took it to a new level. And it was cool. It was cool. Like, you don't lose the cool factor to it. But I'd say the only time where it really had its biggest effect was when you played your first game and you saw that it wasn't just, your mom and dad at the games and maybe, some family members and stuff like that. It was all your home fans, because you also didn't have the moms and dads and the fans of the other teams like you would, but you'd get that home court, home turf, home, ice advantage. And so you're a little awestruck by it. And then, we were walking around town at the beginning when we first came in, and we got a lot of attention. People were like, oh, hey, it's, number blah, blah, blah from the Rockhounds and this sort of thing. And you're like, wow, that's cool. But then after, the town got used to seeing you around town, and you got used to seeing people around town, you'd still get the attention. But it was just kind of matter-of-factly. If someone called out your name or something, you'd go over, say hi, and just strike up a conversation. And that was part of what they kind of told us to do, just to get good relations with the town. But then also a lot of people just enjoyed it and didn't really go to many people's heads. It was just kind of like, oh, this is really cool that this is happening. I haven't had this happen before, so I'm just going to enjoy it and then go about my daily life. And like I touched on when we did our Miniseries podcast, we ended up getting to know a lot of the high schoolers that were our age in the town. And so, if we weren't at practice or at games or something, and they weren't at school or something, you'd all end up hanging out at Tim Hortons or the restaurants or something in those groups. So you kind of just became another teenager in the town who happened to play a sport on the weekend that people went to go watch. So it doesn't, and that might be some of the fact that we were older, that it didn't go to our heads as much as it would like a 10 or 12-year-old. But I just think that's probably how it felt for a lot of these other kids. They were just living their life, and the cameras just happened to be there with them.
Those are both good points. So coming to the end of this episode, and I just wanted to wrap this all up real nicely. So most of this episode was about social media and media and youth sports. I mean, that's why we had our little interview with Kenny Long, who does run Typha Radio, as well as, he was on Friday Night Tykes as well. And so the question I have for y'all, and I'll answer it first, but the question I have for y'all is social media and media generally good for youth sports? And I'm not talking about sports, for these kids after youth sports and whatnot. I'm talking about under 18 youth sports in the moment. Is it good for athletes, honestly? And my opinion is that generally, I would say yes. Obviously, there are ups and downs, but as time goes on, I mean, already this is something that's kind of being normalized in youth sports and sports in general. So it's not like there's a whole ton of pressure nowadays. So I think that normalization of media, social media, having cameras out at all times is kind of taking away that pressure. And in my opinion, I think there are a lot of positives to, games and whatnot being advertised to the media, to social media and whatnot. And it helps, get kids out there. I think film is always important because it not only helps the athlete see what they did wrong, but it gives opportunities for other people to help a kid tell them, hey, these are some things you do really good, and that boosts their confidence. And then as well as humble them and say, hey, these are some things you got to work at, because I mean, that's just reality. So I just want to see what y'all think about it. Is social media and media good generally for youth sports?
I think there's more positives to it than negatives. Of course, we shouldn't be, streaming and having social media accounts for, YMCA beginner 4-year-old soccer. But if the association you're with that, let's say, starts at 8 years old and goes all the way up to 18, if they have a social media account to broadcast what they're doing as an organization, or if your team mom or something decides, I want to start a social media page for you guys to follow and kind of share with your friends and stuff like that, and we'll take pictures of you guys and post them so you can get on social media and have fun with it. Yeah, sure, why not? Youth sports is about having fun. It's about enjoying it. And if you get on social media and you have a follower, a following of 100 people or whatever, you're having fun with it. People are taking pictures of your trips with your friends and stuff like that, and it's something to remember. So I think that's good. I just think, and same with the streaming and stuff, people have grandparents and stuff that can't always come. So, if you stream the games at a certain level and, now the grandparents can log in and watch your games, that's awesome. Now that you all can share something at distance. I just think we should be careful, and people should be careful about treating athletes like something they aren't. And that's not a bad thing. It's just, don't put more pressure on them to succeed than they need. And like Kenny said, no youth football player is getting a multi-million-dollar contract before middle school or high school or whatever. So, we shouldn't be putting the pressure that these guys are, elite athletes, because, reality is, yeah, a couple million people have heard of them, but then when you think about it on the larger scale, there might be triple, if not more people who haven't heard of them. So we don't need to put that pressure on them. Do it for the right reasons. Don't do it for the wrong reasons, basically.
Yeah, and I agree with what Addison said. It's all great. I think it's great to an extent. I don't think you should put this thing on a pedestal and idolize it and let these kids believe that like that they're not believe, but don't idolize it, because again, this isn't the NFL. This is youth football. These are youth sports. So don't go bananas over the whole thing. But, it is nice that, grandma and grandpa can, live in California and, their grandkid is playing football in Texas and they can watch that game. Or like in your case, Simon, your dad was in Colorado and you were playing in Texas. Your dad was able to watch that game. And something I've kind of experienced, playing at NDSU, is they didn't stream all of our games. But when we went to this showcase in Blaine, they did stream some of the games. And so my parents were able to watch, because a lot of my teammates are from Minnesota. And so mom and dad, families, all of that are there. And my parents weren't there. But, being able to stream those games was nice, that my parents were still able to watch. But I think, you got to do this to an extent, is don't put this on a pedestal and don't idolize this, because again, they're 10, 11-year-old kids. Kenny's never seen a kid go to the NFL straight out of Taifa. So just relax a little bit, have fun with it, and don't let it get twisted and distorted with what its actual intention and purpose is. Because Addison also made a good point, is there's a lot of people that did see that show. There's also a lot of people that haven't seen that show. And if you said the name Mizell Miller, who's that? I don't know who that is. But on the other hand, there's kids who might be as good, maybe even better than some of the kids we saw on Friday Night Tykes. But they haven't gotten a look, or we don't know about them because there wasn't a TV show on them. There isn't they play football in, I don't know, Colorado instead of Texas, so it's just not as big, and so it's just not as noticeable. So I think it varies, and it can be helpful. It can also be toxic. It just depends. It depends on the light at which it's used on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think that totally makes sense, and you're totally right. Like, it should be used for the right reasons, and I agree. I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, if there is any sort of media or social media following of a youth sports league team, whatever that is perceived as will be based on whatever adult is running that, that account. Because I guess a kid could figure it out for themselves. It's not like the hardest thing in the world. Most of the time, it will probably be ran by an adult, and the way they use that social media will depend on them. Which, hey, adults in youth sports, we all know it by now. It could go either way at this point.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess we said it all, and I know we're trying to close this out here real quick, but I know this is partially a reactions video, and I think everybody will agree, both listeners and us. Probably the biggest reaction to this whole interview we had was when we first introduced Kenny, and he came on through our headsets and everything, and he had that voice from the radio that he has on the show. And I know we all kind of looked at each other and we're big grins on our face, high-fiving and stuff like that, because it seems so authentic. And then to get him talking about things in a different light, I think that was just one of my favorite things from the interview in general, and I'm sure everybody else can agree. And I think it's definitely worth a listen, whether you've seen the show or not. I think it's probably one of the best recordings we've had at the cycle, and so that's just my kind of 2 cents, because I think that's something we need to touch on with how cool that was, geeking out like we were a bunch of fangirls or boys of some band or something just over that small little thing. I think that was just really cool to actually get that interview and hear that voice.
Yes, 100%. Totally agreed. I can't tell y'all. I mean, I know the listeners heard me say thanks once, but I said thanks at least a million times to Kenny. I didn't think we could land a guy like him, but we did. And honestly, hey, he's such a nice guy, and he really helped us out. I mean, I just edited that whole interview, and I know I sounded nervous, like not as composed as I used to, or as I usually am. But hey, it is what it is. I thought it was a great interview, and all the thanks to him. He's a great guy. I think it's the type of people we need in youth sports, if I'm being honest. More of Kenny Long types,
Yes. And like he said, he's done some big podcasts, and he's done some small ones, but he was super nice about it. He was a great guy. He was an all-star. Like, he was awesome. He really was just an awesome, super awesome guy. Like, I had no complaints, and he was more than willing to do it. And yeah, there was no complaints. He genuinely, or at least to me, he seemed genuinely happy to do it. He had a great attitude, he definitely seemed like interested and really wanted to do the interview, and really was kind of happy and willing to provide information and insight on the show and youth sports in youth football in Texas. So I thought it was really awesome that he was genuine. He didn't feel like, I didn't feel like he felt like his time was being bothered or anything like that at all. I didn't feel like that at all.
No doubt about it. Shout out to Kenny Long. Shout out to the Texas Youth Football Association, aka TIFA. And hey, if you have not checked out Friday Night Tykes, I would highly recommend it. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a huge football fan, but watching that show definitely made me think a couple times over about how I want to approach putting my kids into sports. Not that I have any kids, just to be clear, I'm too young for that. There we go.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we're all a little too young for kids, but I do think it's worth a listen. I think our podcast episodes are worth a listen. With this mini series we're doing, especially because a lot of people who are going to be listening have taken part in youth sports at some degree. So I think everybody can relate to it. Everybody's going to enjoy it. And, if you guys like the Kenny Long interview, we will do our best to get more guys like that, more people of his character. And, hey, maybe we might even see or hear him on a couple podcasts in the future.
All right, Addison, Justin, do y'all have any last words before we close it up? Last thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, Simon. I appreciate you having me on and let me listen into the interview with Kenny and let me kind of put my opinions and 2 cents into things and just let me kind of express some things that I've felt and things that I've thought about. I do appreciate the opportunity, and it's been an awesome experience. And then Kenny, I've said thank you probably like 1,000 times, but again, I wanted to say thank you for that awesome interview and taking the time out to let us ask you some questions and just kind of pick your brain a little bit. It was awesome. It's kind of surreal to see, someone you watched on TV and hear their voice, and now you get to ask them questions. It's just an awesome experience. So thank you very much for this amazing lifetime experience.
Yeah, I think we all said thanks to Kenny a lot, and I'm just gonna leave it here with a cool note. Let's, if you're listening right now, keep an eye out here in the future. We're gonna have a couple interviews coming with a couple college athletes. And Simon, what were the names of the people you had coming on here soon?
Oh, coming up, we do have a ton of interviews. Listen, I know you have a friend of yours, this girl who played, it was hockey, right? On the college level?
So we have, coming up, we have an interview with Jasmine Hughes. She is about to start her first year playing college hockey. Hockey has not always been the only sport she has played. She has also taken part in basketball as well as a few other sports. She's going to be hopping on here to help us discuss some things with our mini-series. I know you have a couple girls willing to come on. I know we've been lacking on some female opinions and voices here at the cycle, and we were working to get on that. Jasmine, she did track this year. She also took part in basketball when she was younger, and she's about to start her first year at Alvernia College playing ice hockey for their team. And she's had some good experiences traveling across the country playing sports, and she's had some good and bad experiences with coaches and things in her life. So I think she's going to be a great person to bring on, and you all should tune in.
Oh, absolutely. I look forward to that interview. There's a plenty of interviews going forward. I'm going to be honest with the listeners. I'm still scheduling all of them, making sure I'm confirming, but the ones that I have confirmed as of now, I got my boy. I don't know if I should say their names. Forget it. I'll say their names. I got my boys.
Give them a little suspense as to what's going on, because good idea of what we got coming in the works, so people don't just think we're faking the hype. Got some good people coming on.
Yeah, no, we definitely do. And I'll just say these two names. They're confirmed. We'll be doing the interview pretty soon here. But my boy Nick Garza and Jake Schaefer, both of these guys went to Northern Colorado with me. They graduated this year. They're both physical education majors. The interesting thing is that they're both I'm not going to say way older than me, but they're both much older than me, I would say. So they have plenty of more experience, coaching youth, working with kids and whatnot. And, we're going to talk about discrimination, I want to say, in sports. And so that'll be really interesting because, it's from the point of view of 3 physical educators, young ones at that, diverse backgrounds, I want to say. And so it'll be really cool to listen to what they got to say, as well as, I'm not going to make any promises, but hopefully we could get our fellow podcasters, the Ball Girls, Jordan and Haley, on here pretty soon here. Both of them are Canadians. I don't know what that has to do with anything.
I don't know, but if Kawhi's got something to do with it, I'm sure, it'll be good. Yeah, that's right, the Ball sisters. And do I tell them about some of the guys that I've been talking to, some ex-pros in college college guys, or should we leave that up to them to watch out for?
Oh, let's leave it up to them. You know, we gave them
Alright.
3 guests. I think that's a pretty good amount. We'll leave it there. That sound good?
Yeah, for sure. And now at least they know a little bit. We got some guys that we're looking at to bring on who definitely know their stuff and know what they're talking about. So yeah, stay tuned, and we'll get these episodes out when they're all done and they're sounding good. So stay tuned.
Next. All right, Addison, Justin, appreciate y'all coming on to the podcast. Always a good time, you know, I appreciated it. For the listeners, look out for the next episode of the official Cycle 365 podcast. We're going to be covering the NBA, those potential return scenarios, along with top 74 list, our reaction to Michael Jordan's The Last Dance. In addition, popular request, we're going to be bringing back the Fantasy Fictional Football League, talking about undrafted free agents, and then in the future, look out for potential Fantasy Fictional Football League content. We actually run season simulations, and we'll report that to y'all. I think it's a fun little thing. It's great. Obviously, this mini-series is going to continue throughout the summer. Look for episodes on Monday and Tuesday. If you haven't checked out the last one, check it out. It was great. Thanks for rocking with us. Give us some love on social media. And yeah, we're out.